Welcome to the INTJ equation. Today we are joined by Mike. Mike is an INTJ with Schizoid Personality Disorder as well as autism spectrum disorder. Is that correct?
Yes, and other things.
And other things. So we'll definitely get into that. We also had some time zone conflicts. We were sitting here like wondering about it because we're both Mountain Standard Time, but for some reason I'm an hour behind. Um, Arizona, I guess we don't observe the daylight savings time, but for some reason we had a time issue, so I'm sorry.
Yep.
Anyways, Mike also has an ENFP girlfriend, which is like a pedagogue relationship for INTJ is a very, very good relationship. So we're definitely going to discuss that as well. So stick around towards the end, and we'll also have questions from the audience. So Mike, you want to introduce yourself a little bit and tell the people more than I didn't tell?
Yeah, I type myself as an INTJ. I have last month been diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and unspecified trauma. And it was about an 8 year journey, 8 or 9 year journey to me to get to this point. I decided to branch out a little bit and become more social online. I've struggled with asociality since I was with. I'll stop right there. It's a term that I'll throw around a lot when I explain myself. But if I could say that the difference between the terms antisocial and asocial are confusing for people. People sometimes confuse them. Antisocial implies criminality. It implies psychopathy. It implies major problems with society. Asociality implies an aversion towards people, a lack of social context. So I am mostly asocial up until 4 years ago when I met my fiance. I'll tell my woman, my wife. I don't really care. My wife. When I met her, that was definitely the point when my life started to turn around, when my therapy started to click, when my medications were over. And now I've decided that I want to branch out and find at least a few social contacts. And I thought that this would be a great idea. I saw my therapist on Monday, and yeah, I think this is going to go great.
Awesome. Thank you for doing this. A lot of I tried getting quite a few schizoid on this channel and they just didn't have any interest in doing it. So
Yeah.
it's just you wanting to branch out and grow as a person, right?
It's also probably because my SPD is not too severe in comparison to people who have much more severe trauma or happen to be within families where schizophrenia and schizophrenia spectrum disorders are more present. My SPD branches from my autism. I have difficulty socializing. I was a strange child. Um, it led me to also my family is somewhat abusive, but it led me to be very reclusive. It led me to not care about society. It led me to be obsessed with dark ideas and to read Schopenhauer and Bukowski at the expense of things that are probably more important to read, things like that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for coming out and sharing that. It's not an easy thing to do. So what age were you diagnosed with autism at?
I was diagnosed last month with both of them. I have slipped
Oh,
through the cracks my entire life. I am one of these people that just has this story. I didn't even go to high school. I completed my first year of high school and I told them, you're never going to get me back inside that building. So I went to an online program that fell apart. I ended up going to college anyway. I got my GED and just went in. I barely spoke to anyone. I ended up graduating, but I only have a 2 year degree. I do not go well with school. I have ADHD. You've talked about ADHD because I've been watching some of your stuff, and I have the real ADHD. It's gotten better, but I used to not be able to transition between rooms without failing to remember what I was doing. I used to have to count things on my hand just to be able to move about the house and remember, okay, I need to go to the laundry room, I need to go out get the mail, stuff like that. It's horrible. It just dices your experience where you can barely function. If you have the real ADHD, it's really debilitating. So
yeah. I think a lot of people are out there. Well, I can't sit there and read a book an hour straight without gazing away once, and I don't know. It just seems like it's just kind of an overblown thing, but I've definitely seen examples where it's real for sure.
Yeah, reading is tough. I have a lot of books, but I had to teach myself how to read. I had a reading coach and everything. So
All right. What's it like being an INTJ and having all these diagnoses?
it's odd because I like being an INTJ. Where we have that nerd herd kind of introversion. We're all very intelligent. I don't think that there is such a thing as an unintelligent INTJ. Um, but at the same time, I have this TE orderliness, a concern for my spaces being clean, for my schedule being clear, for setting myself on goals that better me. And honestly, I think that once the INTJs find the right instruction and they find the right direction, it's not very hard being an INTJ. The social component does plague us, but really, I think most INTJs find a friend and they're okay after that.
Yeah, it's been a struggle for me. Like I don't know for people who are watching that are new, I'm an INTJ and I have avoidant personality disorder and schizoid personality disorder and avoidant personality disorder are very similar. The main difference is that schizoid, they really don't desire any social interaction, and avoidance, they do desire social interaction, but it's very neurotic element to it. Like we don't feel worthy or we don't feel lovable and
Yeah,
undeserving of
it's
that, basically.
that they're afraid of negative evaluation from other people, whereas I think most schizoids don't even really consider it. They have to force themselves to invest importance in what other people think.
Okay. To all the INTJs out there who think that we don't need relationships or any social interaction and being schizoid, what's your answer to them, basically?
It is true for some of them. It is true that some schizoids cannot desire it, do not want to form relationships, or for other reasons cannot. Some of them do. I actually invented my own word for this. There's different like quasi-social or parasocial, but I like the term. What did I say? Pausasocial or possesocial, which is a desire for eusocial, for real social relationships, but just a couple of them. You just want real connection, but like three is pushing it for me, right? I have a fiance and a friend, and I'm probably going to stop there. I'll have online relationships. It's not the same thing in my view as far as being close to me. But yeah, I think that I am that kind of schizoid. A lot of it had to do with just challenging myself. And I don't believe that the mental health community is correct in saying that SPD, that's schizoid. I have to remember to say schizoid, not schizoid. Schizoids, they can't be cured. And I would challenge that, and I would actually suggest that the way that it's written in the DSM is that you can't escape it. But really, they modulate those traits and they dampen over time, and you get to a point of functionality, and it's known that schizoids don't tend to stay in therapy and don't tend to seek out therapy because they do find niches in other places. And with the internet, all bets are off. I think that schizoids are people who spend more time on the internet than usual, and I think they're using it to their benefit. And I would like to be able to just share the message that there are lots of treatment options available to you if you want to be more social. And if you don't want to be more social, there's treatment options for you too.
Very cool. So, what I mean, my question was, what is it like not having any relationships? What is it difficult as a schizoid, or is it like, okay, I don't need anybody? I know just being alone myself before I have a few relationships myself, and real terms. I don't really count internet relationships as the same thing as personal relationships as well, but life can be very hard and cruel out there by yourself, right?
Being alone is very comfortable until you need someone else. And it's like, what if I have car trouble? You know, what if I need $100 from someone? I can't answer my parents, they hate me or something like that. And there's just practical reasons to have people in your life. And a lot of schizoids are comfortable at first in their teens and 20s. And then when they start hitting their 30s and 40s, they feel that they wasted a lot of time. And I would feel that it's just of their benefit to just find a therapist and ask, can I get a couple? But for me, when I spent about when I was 14 to 24 years old, I was totally alone. Not a single friend in the world. I was doing it by choice. I was not anxious around others. I'm not, I look fine. I have interest. I can be funny. It's just that it's very taxing to be around other people. And really, the root of it all is the authentic self. Schizoids don't like being inauthentic, but they have to be in order to survive, or so they think. But really, I think that they can change themselves in practical ways to better conform to the opportunities, the social opportunities that come to them.
Yeah, so I've seen the most common schizoid types are INTP and INTJ, and I do see some
Probably.
ISTPs. How do you think a schizoid IS or INTP versus an INTJ? How do you think they differ?
I do know one interesting thing. INTPs, okay, so like the relationship between personality disorders and typology. Um, some of them have like schizoid is tied to the Myers-Briggs traits of introversion and thinking. But if you get someone who's obsessive compulsive, they're probably exactly ISTJ. And for INTPs, that's schizotypal. So I think that the out of bounds thinking that they're known for. Like I think of my dad as an INTP. He frustrates me because he does things the way that he wants to do it. And I feel as though I have a better method. And we argued a lot when I was a kid about, because he would make me do all kinds of stuff around the house. He's a DIY god. But I do feel that INTPs can really be so creative with the way that they think that they become so remote and just inaccessible, and that can lead them to develop the traits of SPD or other asocial conditions.
All right. Do you mind discussing how you might have developed schizoid personality disorder or even autism personality disorder? Do you think that's something that you're born with, or is that something you develop? I know ASD is something, that's when you get when you're very, very young, usually.
Autism is a neurological problem that starts from birth. It is never acquired. I didn't necessarily display too many traits because the very typical thing with autism is that you get the kids born and they start looking at things and they never look at people, or they do for very short periods of time. And they don't look towards the mother to console them. They're just in a bubble in and of themselves. They have delayed speech because it's not obvious to them that they should be speaking to others, at the age of 3-ish or whenever that begins. So I have certain social and cognitive deficits from that. That's one thing that really sets you apart. And some people in the community think that autism can predispose you to developing personality disorders, and schizoid is the most common amongst them. So when I went to my assessment center and they gave me about a 15-page summary of everything that was discussed there, it took about 4.5 hours to do the whole thing. And in it said I have it pulled up too, but it says that I developed it because of the the maladaptation. And it's schizoid is traditionally thought of as something that orbits schizophrenia, but really I think the opinion is shifting that other conditions can do it too. So avoidance can be schizoid as well. It's not very common, but it can happen. And but I definitely, my family environment played a role. My mother, for better or for worse, is an ESTJ. My mother is an INTP. They're not the most compatible types. I feel that I spent the first 4 or 5 years of my therapy experience trying to get my family to understand me, bringing them to family therapy sessions, doing everything by the book, and I was still not accepted. And it got to the point where now I'm in a relationship and they have to deal with all of the baggage and all of the miscommunication, all the oddness that surrounded a family that does not want to accept that a child could be like this. And it snowballed, and it got to the point where a couple months ago we had to tell them that we're having a little less contact. and we're not going to be showing up to engagements as much because we're so misunderstood and they seem to just be refusing to accept what I'm saying. So unfortunately, sometimes kids can be invisible and they just go through the system, and everyone blamed me. Everyone always thought that it was my fault, and I had explanations that I thought were good enough, and they just didn't listen. And it's too late. So
Sorry, I live right above an Air Force base, or right in a flight path of an Air Force base and a airport, so it's really busy today. My
I don't hear
condolences. What's that?
I didn't hear anything, but yeah.
I keep muting myself, but I can't mute myself when I talk. So, and my condolences for having an ESTJ mother. I do not wish that on anybody.
She has really great traits, though. That's the weird thing. Like, I'm not super knowledgeable about typology, but this prejudice towards sensors thing does not make sense to me at all. I've only ever worked menial labor, bullshit jobs, and I've met, I think, every sensing type. Maybe not an ESFJ. I'm not sure if I met one, and I can get along with them. But, there is something to be said. That's one thing that I share with my mother is the TE. She taught me. She's my guru in the TE. But she has this hidden contemptuousness and this prejudice and this propensity towards anger, and she just doesn't want to change. So if she ever sees this, I am willing to speak to them again, but I'm fed up.
Yeah, I don't have any issues against sensors, but ESTJs are the types that rub me wrong just for the same exact reasons. They think they have this idea that they know what's better for everybody, and they just enforce it if you like it or not. And I kind of have a theory like ESTJs are cool before they graduate college and after they retire, but in those years, it can be pretty hard to get along with them.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I just wanted to point out, I'm guessing this is your fiance, River Oblivion says, I'm proud of you, Michael. Both of you amazing people to collaborate. Yes, thank you again for doing that. And if you have any questions, go ahead and type it in the chat. We'll get to those soon.
Cool.
All right. So for my research, I was reading that they couldn't, I don't know about SPD in particular, but they can't diagnose autism spectrum disorder and avoidant personality disorder. They're two very different disorders, basically. I'm not really a big fan of the DSM-5 and comorbidity and stuff like that.
It's bullshit. The whole thing's bullshit.
It's just a way to bill the insurance. That's all it is. So why do you think that you didn't develop AVPD rather than a SPD? Why do you think you became schizoid rather than avoidant?
I skipped high school. I think that's a big deal about it. Like I don't know anything about that era. I have a very poor memory, but like I just decided early on that I also had a problem. Like even in 5th and 6th grade, I was already talking like I was in my 20s. Like I was a smart kid and nobody can convince me otherwise. Like I just have that 8-ishness in Enneagram. I don't need to be told how to do things because I think very thoroughly and I think I have the best idea before I act. But social anxiety did exist in me. I was initially diagnosed way the hell back when I got an ADHD diagnosis, alcohol use disorder, major depressive disorder, and social anxiety. And that was a big thing to be slapped with, but it described what I was like at that time. I was an alcoholic before I turned 21, and I'm doing much better, much better. It also says that in my report that diagnosis was revoked. So I don't have a drinking problem really. But I forgot the question. Like I said, I have ADHD. So
I forgot the question. How come you didn't develop avoidant personality disorder rather than
maybe I would say that avoidance, because their core is anxiety, and maybe that's the start point that leads to SPD. But working the other way around is kind of contradictory because they don't care to begin with, so it's hard to start caring. Right. And when they do start caring, that's more than bridging into a normal sociality rather than, maybe that doesn't make sense. But I think that, avoidance care about what other people think, and schizoids just are very unattuned to the needs or just the presence of others. Like it's easy to forget that other people are around you. Some of them will start talking to themselves. They're the spooky kids at school. They're the kids that never played with others on the playground, So.
Yeah, I kind of often wonder that myself. I always was I don't know if I do have autism. It's possible. I think it's kind of just a label that STJs pin on intuitives in general, and a lot of times, and there definitely is autism out there. I've worked with kids in schools with behavior issues, and there's definitely autism's a real thing. So I'm not trying to discount that. Um, we'll go ahead and take a little breather from our questions and get to some questions and comments from the audience. Mao Mu, sorry,
Never asked me a question.
name wrong. The diagnosis of autism should made with caution in a person with a history of trauma. Trauma can mimic autism. Yes, I
That's
think
absolutely true, and that was what I went in with, and they determined that it was both. You can totally, if you want to explore, the validity of my diagnosis, I welcome that entirely. But I'm just saying that the people, my professionals, determined that it was both. Going in, I didn't think that I'd be diagnosed with autism necessarily, but they basically told me that I was autistic, then traumatized, and then the SPD set in about the average time that it does when you're about 13 or 14 entering puberty. You stop talking to people. So
that's exactly what happened to me, but I hit puberty a little earlier, I guess. It happened about 10 or 11 for me. I know I talk about this a little bit in the Avoidant Personality Disorder video I just released, which I'll try to remember to pin up there, and I'll put it down in the description. I wasn't really nurtured by my mother as a kid. She was very cold and distant. I don't know if you had that same issue, but I think that can kind of lead to symptoms of autism. And your fiance said that is true, but as far as I can tell, it's not trauma to contribute to his autism.
she's saying that I was not traumatized. Okay.
Yeah, I think she's saying that it's not the trauma that contribute to your autism in particular.
Well, it would be you are autistic and with ADHD. You're a kid that is a misfit and your parents don't know what to do about it. So they abuse you because they don't know what else to do and they're not reaching out for help. And then you develop SPD. That's how it was explained to me. But yeah.
Okay. And one more question from Malmu. Is there any treatment for autism?
There's no cure, but yeah, there's lots of treatment.
Yeah, there's something called ABA, Applied Analytical Analysis Therapy, basically. It teaches like people with autism, like life skills, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a little bit of that, and I consider going into that profession as well. I currently work in a behavioral health hospital.
Cool.
All right. I was reading through the notes that you thought your dad might have been INTP initially, but now you're thinking INFP. Are you still leaning on that boat, or you think he's an INTP?
No, I'm not. I think in his old age, he's starting to explore his extroverted feeling through his religion. And it's like one time he came up to me, we were just talking, and he said, as a kid, he was trying to reach for a word. And he's like, I just didn't care about people automatically. And I'm starting to try and do that. And I said, well, it's compassion, right? You're just automatically investing empathy in someone else. And that really helped him. So now he knows the word compassion and he's trying to build that on himself. But he's a very smart person. He's been an engineer for 35 or 40 years. He's been on big projects. Definitely kind of a Poindexter kind of guy. But he's the type of INTJ that is not, I don't want to say in your face, but he's not abrasive like some of them can be when they're trying to be funny. He's much more mellow. But at the same time, he was walked all over by his wife, and it's an unspoken thing that you just can't comment on their relationship, however much of a dumpster fire it is. And I tried to help him, and he didn't want it. So he was my only friend through all of my period of not socializing. He was the only one that would listen to my autistic verbigeration. And now I don't talk to him as much. He seems to be stunned as to everything that happened. So,
yeah, the INPs can definitely be doormats, so they have to be careful about that. And INFPs, I don't know, it's not their stereotypical thing, but once they get over their TE inferior and embrace that, they can be insanely brilliant too, as well. What's your experience in anhedonia? Do you have that, or just in general?
Oh, anhedonia?
Yeah,
it's something that dips in and out with me now. They're also kind of I think they're changing like what the definition is or what like the core nature of the concept is, but pretty much it just means that you're not feeling anything. You're just anhedonic. You're going through the day. You might dissociate. I'm prone to dissociation. Especially schizoids experience social anhedonia, where they just can't bring up the level. They can't maintain the level in conversation to not be considered, to not be perceived as someone who's taciturn and aloof and so on. And they are those things. Maybe in short bursts, they don't need to be. But yeah, I really struggled with it when I was a kid, just not feeling anything. Just not feeling anything. So.
Yeah, I struggle with that too. I kind of feel myself dipping over into SPD, being schizoid from an avoidant. I think after a while, you just kind of numb it and you just kind of like, it just doesn't matter anymore. You just got to accept it and go with it.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to avoid going there. I mean, I guess, I don't know, in my personal opinion, I'd rather feel nothing than torment. I don't know. It's just me, but
well,
I
that's
just
the biological mechanism because it's intolerable, right? So you're in a situation where you can't escape, and that's we'll talk about my on my my wife's dissociative identity disorder, and it is a defense mechanism. So even in someone with me who doesn't have parts, I don't have alternate personalities. I just check out. You check out, and you can't help but count down the months towards whatever is going to help you escape from school or vacation, and you just go through this fog, and it's awful.
Yeah, at school, I was bullied relentlessly until high school when Columbine happened. I kind of embraced the school shooter archetype. I kind of regret that now, but it definitely was a defense mechanism from bullying, but it got me out of the house and away from my family. So I was kind of thankful for school, and school was just really easy for me. And I was kind of like you. I was like, I wasn't really allowed to have social relationships or anything. So about
It was
7 or 8.
impossible for me to have friends. I didn't have any friends. They wouldn't let
Yeah.
me have anyone over to the house.
Same. Yeah, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. Wasn't allowed to have any friends. So I just read encyclopedias,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I didn't understand them at a great deal at 7 or 8, but it definitely helped with a lot of things. I guess so. It was an escape for me. All right. Yeah, I guess we can touch on your girlfriend or your fiance. How's your relationship? I understand that she has you typed her different personalities, right? It's a multiple personality disorder, but they renamed it dissociative identity disorder.
Yes, that's correct. It's now called DID. And she has 6 principal parts. It is, I do not want to, I really want to do it justice because no matter how much you read about it, it's still highly mysterious. It's a
Yeah.
very strange thing, a way to move through life. But they have these, I have to back up and explain it. So, dissociation is a phenomenon in which you check out from your surroundings, you check out from your feelings and yourself in order to preserve your emotions because otherwise you'd be overwhelmed. Sometimes it can be fading colors, feeling cold, the sky grows dark. Like lots of things can happen. But if you do it from the earliest age chronically, and usually they think that they have a genetic predisposition towards dissociation, then you can become intolerable of yourself. And what happens is that any part of yourself actually splits off and becomes a separate personality state. And they switch between them. Sometimes they switch involuntarily, sometimes they can switch voluntarily, and sometimes they have one part, sometimes people have hundreds of parts. Well, my girlfriend has 6, and I'm going to try not to name drop any of them. I'm going to just use their part, how I type them. But she has a INFP. She is very affectionate in this mood, in this personality stage. She's more explorative. She's just very easy to go along with. I enjoy when she's the INFP. I have it pinned up on the wall. So the ISTP, I want to change that. I don't sure about that one, but this is the angry type. So when she becomes intolerably angry, when she gets white hot angry and difficult to deal with, then she switches to that type. She has an ESTP type. This type is gay. This type is a man. The genders can change. They don't even need to be They can be objects, they can be entities, they can be gods. It's very strange, but sometimes there are more or less archetypal parts. Child parts are called littles, and adult parts are called bigs. Stuff like that. So she has an ENFP part. She has a sexualized part, which is an ESFP, and the manipulative side, the seething, angry side, the cackling side, the nihilistic side. I type as an INTJ from having interacted with her. I actually named that type. When she met me, it wasn't really understood that it was a person. And since then, it's gained traits to make it a person. But that's the INTJ. I think I covered all of them. But yeah, one time we sat down and we were just, because I'm teaching her a little bit about typology because we watch cartoons and we want to see what types they are. And we ended up typing all of them. And she's satisfied with the results. So.
Okay. She commented in the comments as well. You can use their names if you like.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I already covered all of them. So, but yeah.
All right. I met this girl one time. I was walking around this apartment complex that I used to live at, and I just met this really nice, what I thought was an ENTP, and we just kind of walked her home, and we talked, and we hit it off really well. Then we met up again like a week later, and she was a drunk ESFP, and she explained her traumas to me, and that she had DID, and that she has multiple personality disorders as well. So how do you and I'm sure you can relate having trauma and your own struggles there. How do you manage these types? Like that angry ISTP comes out, what do you do?
Well, first of all, she has a therapy group that's specifically for it, so that's wonderful for her. I've had dinner with these lunch with these people several times. They're very interesting people with DID, and we have rules. You have to make sure that the types are communicating. It's normal practice for them to ask to have a meeting inside of themselves. Because one of the very interesting things about DID, and I think, don't quote me, but I think this has been demonstrated, that they have major gaps in memory. When they switch to parts, all kinds of things can happen. And it prevents them, more than any part of it, it prevents them from being employed. But where was it going with this? Yeah, they have separate memories, and that is very important to recognize because they have to talk to one another a lot, and it's this that's the subjective experience. There's always chatter. That's how she explains it to me. No matter how calm and normal she seems, voices are talking to her, and they're not schizophrenic voices. They're qualitatively different. And they're separate personality states. And sometimes, especially earlier in our relationship, she was so much more sad because I helped her a lot with the treatment. I actually was the one to explain to her that she had DID, and I pushed for testing, and she got a diagnosis. I thought that she'd come out as borderline, and at that time I thought she was an ESFP, but she ended up having complex PTSD, and it seems to be where the scientific community is leading to, that personality disorders, not all of that, some of them are spurious, and some of them are really just trauma at root. And I was glad that she wasn't diagnosed with BPD, but really, if they're given the opportunity to stay home, have a nurturing family, nothing happens. Like, they don't spring that, then the bad behavior, the crazy behavior kind of goes away. So unlike schizophrenics, because schizophrenics, they have to take their medication if they go off of it, and they might be treatment resistant, but the voices always will be telling them stuff like cut your genitals off, kill your dog, things like that. So
yeah, I just had a rough week last week. I had to I don't know if they're diagnosed schizophrenics, but they were very, very psychotic, and they were young, so I think their psychosis was just coming up, and they were just very, very disruptive all night, yelling and screaming. And
it's sad.
It is. It's also hard for others to deal with, especially when they don't want to take their medicines. I'm pretty against psych medicines the most part, but that instance, there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to go backtrack here before I forget Mamu's other question. I don't know many INTJs in real life. Many INTJs online states they have suffered trauma. Do you think there's a correlation between INTJs and trauma?
I think INTJs are more likely to be neurodivergent, and neurodivergent people are more likely to be abused because they're harder to handle.
Yeah, I think just being different and misunderstood and not having like an Uncle Ben or whatever to go to, that's an INTJ in most cases, can just be very much of a struggle myself. I was reading about Enneagram 5, which there's a lot of INTJs are, and I am myself.
Me too.
And then people just say, like, I just heard people in the comments saying that fives always have this heartbreaking childhood growing up just because they're just different and misunderstood. So I think just being different can be a little rough. I've definitely talked to a lot of neurotypical INTJs, and they say that they didn't have as many struggles, but
Definitely.
trauma and type, it doesn't discriminate. It can happen to anybody, of course.
Yeah.
And I think Oblivion or River want to clear something up. We don't have God speaking to us for your information.
Yeah, she doesn't have a god type. She has a weird, creepy background force type. But I've read stuff where they'll leap up in the middle of a therapy session and declare that they're a god from Aztec mythology and start breaking shit. But all kinds of stuff can happen.
Yeah. Very cool. Or not cool, but very interesting at least.
Yeah.
Malmu comments, DID sounds tough. Amazing people can get help now. Yes. The one lady I was talking to, I don't know if she really had DID or she was just borderline. I don't know what's going on with her, but yeah, she was very resistant to treatment. She was also an alcoholic, sadly. All
Yeah,
right.
one interesting thing that I'd like to say about DID is that it's not necessarily an on or off switch. So people can have the sense that they have another person or something strange about them. It can also be induced by therapy. It's not uncommon for people to fake it. But an interesting thing, one of the most interesting things I've heard about it is that when you ask them when it started, the average age is around 5, but it's almost never diagnosed in children. So the way that they're experiencing the DID and responding to it it's different. So they take on new traits. Parts can split, they can merge, they can become dominant for months and years and then switch again. So
Yeah, that's a shame that they don't do that. I can kind of understand why, because kids at that age have imaginary friends and their just imagination runs wild. But like personality disorders, they won't diagnose many until 18 or later, and that's just too late.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it should be nipped in the bud early as possible, I think. All right, and she comments, DID is wild, but it is manageable depending on person to person, of course.
Yeah.
So having your own struggles with socialization and ENFPs, they can be quite introverted in their own respects. How does she handle your faults?
We're both pretty introverted. I call her an ambivert. She's kind of both. She is really just the thing that animates me. Like I like her energy every day. She's a goofball. Being around people that have that, even if you're an INTJ or an affectless INTP or something like that, you being around infectiously positive people that are fun changes you. And it can be more potent than therapy. It can be more potent than drugs. It can be more potent than medication, and I think that kind of, it's not strictly duality. I think I could be in a relationship with an ESFP, but it would be a lot different. But with her, we're both intuition dominant, so it's just a circus all the time, just ideas all the time,
Yeah.
and it's just fun. We hit it off really early, and we haven't had many really bad periods, and it's been 4 years now, so I think it's going fine.
Okay. She had another comment she'd like to put out there, or I don't know if she wants it public, but I guess I'm assuming so. With the right support
I have no
system
idea.
goes.
You don't have to comment if you don't want to.
Okay. I appreciate it. I do want audience interaction. With the right support system goes for everyone, no matter the diagnosis. It can help heal the messed up things that your head can do. Yes, I agree, and I think INTJs, schizoid, and avoidance will definitely be the first to dismiss that idea, I guess, or not consider it. Okay, can you give us a background how you and River met?
So it was my last semester of college in 2018, and we both smoked at the time, and we have quit. She actually asked me what's the first thing we're going to do on this journey of self-improvement? I told her smoking, and she said, no, that's the last thing. It's like, no, it's the first thing. And we were smoking together, and we had a class at about the same time. So we got to talk to each other for a couple months. That same year, I was still completely asocial, chronically dissociated, not doing well at all, drinking. And I told my therapist, one of my first things I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for phone numbers. I'm not necessarily going to talk to them. I'm just going to ask to get to know them and ask them for a phone number. And I did it for a couple people, and then I did it for her because I wanted to be her friend. We got along really well. And then it became romantic. And then pretty shortly after that, she shared with me that she had been raped when she was 16. And that plays a big part in her story, obviously. And at that point, I was really scared. I didn't know what to do. So I just thought that I'm not going to run away. This is going to be the one. I'm going to put in all the necessary energy to make this relationship work because I want a relationship. And it paid off. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Very cool. I was in relationships too. I think 2 major relationships. I had a couple short-term things, of course, but one was an ESTP and one was an ESFP, and they both have borderline personality disorders. And I just don't think I can do that again personally. Maybe with DID, I don't know, but not with BPD. I mean,
well, unfortunately, borderlines very often have DID and vice versa. So
yeah, I just think the DSM-5 is just so convoluted, and it's just the way for STJs. I know you said you don't understand discrimination against sensors, but psychology is a very abstract thing in nature, and they try to make it concrete, and it just isn't concrete.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, and you talk about having a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed bipolar disorder too. I just want to kind of hear your journey and your experiences with that.
I probably should have said that was the off limit part because there are embarrassing stories, but I'm very bipolar. I don't know where it fits in typically. You wouldn't think of a schizoid as being bipolar. With me, the mania aspect plays more important role than the depression aspect. But I have run away from home. I have torn down the entire house and rebuilt it, cleaned the entire house, gone on a 5-mile hike in the middle of the night. I've done all kinds of stuff worse than that. And it went untreated for a long, long time, and that's not normal. And there's another education opportunity. Bipolarity does not mean up and down all the time. Bipolarity means that you have these 3, 4, 5 month long cycles between a highly elevated mood and a highly not elevated mood. And in order to be diagnosed with it, you only have to do that once. If you do it one time, it's dangerous enough for people to put you on mood stabilizers, which they did with me. That's another diagnosis that was revoked by my assessment. So I'm going to talk to my psychiatrist about going off of mood stabilizers, which I've been on for years, heavy, and it sucks. It's one of the probably I would say the ADHD is the worst to deal with, but when you are fully bipolar, on top of everything else, it's a really extreme state to exist in. So,
yeah, for me, I didn't know I was having these mood fluctuations where I'd be down and up. I would say if I was in that instance, I would hypomanic, where you're not full blown mania. Mm-hmm. But what kind of dismissed it for me is because I was on antidepressants and antidepressants alone. And if, according to my psychiatric nurse practitioner at the time, if you're on antidepressant and you're bipolar, it will send you into a manic state without having a mood stabilizer. So that was kind of dismissed for me.
Yeah.
All right. What else? So I think we talked about this a little bit, but I want to touch on it again. Well, we'll go to that in a minute. The criteria for people with SPD don't react to praise and criticism. Is that something that you do, or do you get you take praise and criticism like on a normal person, or how does it affect you?
It's an interesting point because I think it always kind of takes some unpackaging, because it doesn't mean that SPD people will never follow the advice of others. If it makes sense to them, they will, but the emotional content that comes with it can be invasive. A lot of people with SPD don't like to receive compliments. They'll help you all you want, But if you start to, especially if it's an expressive exchange, then they feel like, why even talk? Why are you doing that? Like, what is so important about me or you that you need to be giving me emotion? I don't want your emotion. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. And also, part of that is they don't conform to social norms, not necessarily because they're rebels, but just because they're so unconcerned with it that you start to do things like that. Just dress in black, listen to weird music, stay up all night, not vote, things that I do. So,
Very cool. Yeah, for me, I just worked in prison for 5 years, and I think I just been criticized. I think it was a double-edged sword. I never trusted people to begin with, but it definitely made me more distrusting of people. But I heard everything and anything you can insult a person with working there, so it just doesn't really bother me anymore. And if I always had this paranoia, I think it's our any opposing personality as INTJs. I don't know if you know much about the shadow functions, but when people praise me, I'm kind of like starting to think like, what do you want from me? Like, what are you getting at? Do you want something?
yeah.
Okay. Got some comments here and some questions. River says, with the incident in mind, I was hesitant to reach out to anyone until I met Mike. He gave me validation out of the gate, and he sat and listened to during school breaks. And Malmu, most psychologists don't seem to be trauma trained. How do you find a good psychologist?
That's a good story, too. My mother, when I was 15, I ran away from home for the first time. So she dragged me to a psychologist. And it was just a woman she found, and she found a woman because she doesn't trust men. And she was my psychiatrist, my psychologist, my therapist for 7 years. But I got really lucky. Really, I can explain it through typology. She's an INFJ, and I just clicked with her really well. And she was the first person in my life that was reasonable all the time. Right? She didn't. She just. I don't know if what her specialty or anything was, but I'll just say to the audience, I just got lucky. Maybe interpersonal clicking is more important than what they're trained in specifically. I didn't know that a lot of therapists have inadequate training in trauma, so I don't know.
Yeah, the only psychologists I've seen are, quote unquote PhD psychologist. I know one personally, but he definitely doesn't talk to me that in that way. Was I was going through a custody battle with my ex, and the judge was harping on my mental disorders, and I had to go see a psychologist to get an actual diagnosis. And that's when I found my AVPD clarification. So I've only been to therapists and stuff before, but she definitely gave me that AVPD diagnosis. And I'm not saying that diagnosis can be helpful, but they can definitely kind of give you closure. I think INTJs definitely like closure. So it was $350, but it was very enlightening information. And I've just scoured psychology in the DSM-5 trying to find out why am I so different? That was like my lifelong journey, and that was finally the answer. All right. Go back to some here's another comment from River. I almost said liver for some reason. Trial and error mostly, unless you have some professionally put in good word for you can gain the right treatment. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, she had difficulty finding therapists, and she didn't trust her therapist very much. And I really encouraged her to just develop a relationship. Maybe you don't like them that much to begin with. Be interesting to them. Learn something about your therapist. Ask them questions. It'll make all the process easier. And right now, she loves her therapist. So, and I love her therapist too because she's challenged me on my bullshit and effectively. So I know I can trust her.
Yeah, going back to therapists and psychologists not always being trauma trained, I had an ESFJ therapist, or sorry, EST. Yeah, ESFJ. There we go. She was an ESFJ therapist, and she definitely wasn't very trauma trained, but she would just kind of like say, like, why aren't you more like me? I mean, it was good and bad. It was not very validating for me, but I think INTJs don't really need a lot of validation. But she just kind of like snapped me out of my bullshit a lot of times, like, because like she didn't really understand my avoidant personality disorder, it seemed like. But it was good and bad because it kind of like, just cut your bullshit, basically.
I need to learn more about this. Why do people hate their therapist? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I had an ENFP therapist, a male one, and like I explained to him, like I've been in therapy 8-9 years off and on, more on than off, and he just kept doing these little worksheets with me like I was a beginner, and I worked in behavioral health and stuff like that too. And
No.
as a case manager, I did these kind of worksheets with kids and clients too, and like I kept explaining to him like this is, you know, a little bit below my scope here. He just wouldn't listen, so I just closed services with him.
You know what I do with therapy? I first of all, I only do it every other week at most, because I just don't have much to bring. I'll always write down things that I want to bring to therapy, and I'll organize some notes and bring them to therapy. So it's actually, and it's a little bit of extra work, but, and maybe it's just the INTJ in me, but it always was effective. I maximized my therapy. I got everything that I wanted out of it. I mean, we were very close, and it was super effective, but you know, it's such an individualized process. You know, I don't know what would work for everyone. I don't know tips, because I just, once again, I got lucky. So I think his sound cut out.
Sorry, I had myself muted. All these sirens and jets flying over. Sounds like World War III out there. So 10% of psychologists are INFJs, which I do agree they do gravitate toward therapy and psychology, and they are great at it. They can definitely read people with that FE slant with their NI. Avoid ISTJ and ESTJ psychologists. I agree. They just want to label you with the DSM-5 and shove pills down your throat.
My psychiatrist, my first one, might have been an ESTJ. He put me on olanzapine. He told me that I was paranoid and psychotic. I gained a lot of weight. It's bullshit. I liked him. Interpersonally, it's the same thing. I do jive with ESTJs to a degree, but I'm not sure what type he actually was. We never discussed it, but I could easily see it being that way. And you trust them at first, and it's so hard to gain the gumption to challenge them, especially when you don't have time to learn. That'd be really hard. If you have kids and work and all this stuff, and you're trying to go to therapy once a week at most, and that would just be really tough. But yeah, I have an ISTJ brother. He would be a terrible therapist. He would.
Yeah, I mean, citrus can't be in psychology. I have an ESFJ EMDR therapist, and so far she's great. Only had about 4 sessions with her, but they're very compassionate people, so it's a good fit for her. Have you experienced with EMDR any other modalities, or has it just been CBT therapy?
Well, my fiance's therapist just got trained in it. So I'm not going in for it, but she is, and I'm going to drive her to the physical location to try doing this kind of stuff. And her dissociation is so severe, there's years of her life that she doesn't remember. And it's going to be very interesting. My first therapist, the INFJ, was trained in EMDR, and she tried it with her, and it was too much at first. So I will say EMDR can be very intense. It's not just it's not hypnosis or something like that. It's rough. So
Yeah, I tried it one time before, and it made me very depressed and very agitated and irritable, and I had to stop. And I stopped for like a year, and I'm giving it another shot, and I'm seeing some good results in a very short amount of time. So definitely be open to it. Here's old Flamo. I haven't seen him in a while. Let's just chime in. We need to wrap this thing up. We're getting close to an hour.
Oh, Jesus, it's over already. Jesus.
What's that?
It's over already.
Yeah, time's been flying. This has been a very, very good talk, I think. One of my favorites so far.
Oh, thank you.
Flamo, who's an INTJ with autism as well. I'm glad I refused to have my psychology insult in the title of my video. Yeah, I think we did say something that in the podcast I did with him.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's bring this thing home. I always ask for 3 book recommendations from my guests. Do you have any?
I do. I got them right here. If you want to learn about asociality, this is really great. Party of One, The Loner's Manifesto by Anneli Rufus. I got I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. This is a staple of learning about borderline personality disorder. And I swear, I always highlight stuff so I could just flip over the book and recharge my memory about it. But yeah, that's been really great. And then I have 2 books on dissociative identity disorder. I got Understanding and Treating Dissociative Identity Disorder. This is the darkest book I've ever read.
Really?
It's really rough. And then this is the one that all the therapists suggest. It's called Got Parts. It's very short, and it got a lot of the lingo and work stuff and all kinds of things. So those have helped me very much.
All right. And as an INTJ or somebody with schizoid personality disorder, ADHD, just you as a person, what would you like other people to know? Is there any misconceptions you'd like to clear up?
We can be your friends, no matter who you are. You can coax these kinds of things out of people. It takes a certain amount of sophistication to deal with odd people. But if you're someone who's automatically averse to odd people, oddness, you detect it and you avoid it, you're probably missing out on a lot. You should befriend someone that is unusual to you.
Yes, I think that goes from intuitives to sensors too. I think my last guest, who was an ISFP, and she said that she had a touch of autism too, which is interesting enough. And she was diagnosed in Japan, which is, the last place to be diagnosed with autism, probably one, at least in a civilized world. She said if you do have somebody that's totally different against you, don't focus on the differences, focus on the similarities if you're trying to connect with people.
Yeah.
And one last comment from River, with those books in mind, keep a clear head while reading them. Yes.
It's rough. It's rough stuff. Yeah.
I definitely want to check them out. Okay, you got them written in the notes. So yeah, I'll definitely, I need to start putting those in the description as well. So many good books, so little time. All right. And Mao Mu has one real quick. Read CPTSD From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. Definitely sounds like a good read as well. All right, everybody. This has been one of my favorite podcasts so far, Mike. I really appreciate you coming up here and opening up. I know it's not easy.
Anytime. River has said that if you want to talk about DID, she'd be willing to come on with my help. And that might be interesting too.
I was actually going to ask you guys. I'm trying to define couples, but it's very hard for me to find couples right now for some reason.
Especially an asocial couple.
Yeah, so we'll definitely have to schedule that, and hope everybody looks forward to that. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And thank you for Malmu for coming on. Oflamo, I appreciate you coming on as well. And River, I definitely appreciate you supporting Mike through this. Thank you for going beyond the clickbait, and have a great day.